welcome to the OpenSciEd teacher video series for thermal energy. My name is Chris. I'm a 6th grade OpenSciEd teacher and facilitator, and I'm looking forward to sharing lesson 2 with you because I love the fact that during this lesson, students get to design, conduct, and make meaning from an experiment for the first time. It's always an exciting moment of the year. The video is divided into four parts to help you along with that. Briefly, we'll share how we got here with the lesson outline, highlighting some key moments that happened in the lesson. We're going to dig into those key moments so that I can share with you the things to look for and some things to be careful of. And lastly, we'll do some little materials management suggestions, some tips and tricks I have for teaching this lesson. So when you get here, you will have just finished the anchor lesson for the unit where we introduced the drink dilemma, showing that we have a fancy cup and a regular cup, and one cup works better than the other at keeping a drink cold. We design a quick way to test to make sure that indeed happens, and it does. While we're doing that test, our students draw a quick model of both the fancy and the regular cup, and we do a class consensus model too to kind of get all our ideas about what might be happening on the table. And we create a driving question board and some ideas for investigations that we might do to help us understand to figure out the answers to our questions. Quick lesson at a glance. Let's see what's going to happen in this lesson. Really briefly, it's an investigation lesson. So this will be doing an investigation. It takes 2 days to complete. Materials prep says 30 minutes. It might take a little longer or less depending on how much stuff you have to gather up. And this lesson, while it doesn't require devices, it really does help with all of the data the kids are going to collect. So having at least one person in each lab group with a device that they can use is super helpful. The lesson itself is spread over 2 days and has 2 big chunks in each day. And we're going to take a look at that more closely right now. So day 1, the 4th day of the unit in theory, and there are 2 key moments to look for in here. One of which is they're going to plan and carry out an investigation, and there's a little check-in there for you to do that, and then they're going to actually do it. So they're going to actually get set up in lab stations and gather some data, and then pool that data together as a class. And then the second day arrives, and at the very beginning of the second day, the kids try to make sense of the data that they've collected. And then in the second chunk, they take all of the different cups that they've been testing and they try to put them in order of like which one was the best and which one was the worst and what order should they come in between. It's a super fun moment and actually drives the next 2 lessons, so is also an important part of that. But through those investigations, they really figure out 3 kind of big chunks. The one is that cups with certain features like lids and double walls seem to work better than ones that don't have those features. There is some level of uncertainty around, does the material matter? Like if it's made out of metal or paper or plastic or whatever, and we come to a conclusion that it doesn't seem like straws have any effect at all. And lastly, that when we design experiments, we have to be careful. Change one thing at a time and keep the rest of the things the same so that we can compare our data with each other. Let's take a look at the key moments that we just identified in the lessons, because those are the ones that we're going to want to spend a little bit more time on as a class. So during the first day, in the second part of the lesson, it's kind of right after the navigation part, there's this big chunk, it's about 25 minutes of time where we prep and introduce students to designing an experiment, creating and designing an experiment. And this is really like the first time kids have ever done this. And although we share with them that they have to kind of choose one thing to change, the independent variable, we don't name it yet. And that we have to all measure something, the temperature, dependent variable, we don't name that yet either. And that we have to keep some things the same to make it a fair test, or variables kept constant, controlled variables. We use them, but we don't name them yet. And this is really kind of important because keeping the language simple lets the kids do and explore before they do the naming, and it lets them realize we can do some science and gather some data and we don't have to be super fancy about it. It was really helpful here to remind kids that we're testing cup features. So when they get into small groups, and this is that little checkpoint part on the slide, and they're choosing what they're going to test, it's really helpful walk over to every single group and be like, what did you guys decide to investigate? Okay, great. Well, if you're investigating lids, what are you going to do about straws, in or out? And they have to choose. And are they going to use all fancy or all regular cups? And they have to choose. And are they going to use all plastic cups or all metal cups? And they have to choose. And make sure you get to each group. And this is really like helpful to guide them into their experiment. But remember throughout all of this that your kids' voices are fine here. The teacher's guide gives you great lists for variables kept constant and things that you can test. But what you kids come up with does not have to be word for word. Like, let them use their own words here, and they will do just fine. Um, the second key moment in this investigation is when they're actually doing it, and there's a ton of excitement in the air for this. Like, they're super psyched to be at lab stations, wearing goggles and ready to go. But there's a few things that are important for you to kind of watch out for. The first of which is if you have them just create the data table from the teacher's guide, it actually has a little error. It's their timestamp, and that one uses 0 minutes as the starting temperature, but they need to like wait for 1 minute. That way, their thermometers have a chance to adjust to the temperature of the water in the cup. And you're going to have to make sure that you share that with them and show that to them, because they will not look for that. Going along with that is a little stopwatch thing that you should watch out for. My kids never know how to use a timer. And I always have to remind them, once you start it, don't stop it. Let it count up through the minutes so that they don't stop it when it gets to 1 minute, take a temperature, and then start it over again. And later on, when you get to the class data table, it's going to ask that you give the temperature after 1 minute anyway. That's the part that's in yellow here. And then the total temperature change. So it's really okay to make sure that they know when to record after a minute. And the important part here is they're getting data about features of cups. It's not so important that they do a great job of comparing one cup to another, just that they get the data so that the whole class can look at it over time. Which brings you to day 2. The biggest chunk of day 2 is this 25-minute discussion about analyzing class data. And it's divided into 2 parts. One part says looking for patterns, and there's this little innocuous prompt on the slide where it says, what patterns do you notice? And students struggle with this. And so I actually find it's really important to give them some guidance, some sentence frames to work with in the beginning here, like a cup with, and they choose a feature, a lid, always, almost always, never, almost never, perform better than a cup without lid, so that they have something that they can use to start with, and they can find some of those patterns without struggling with what the word pattern means. There are key ideas from each part in the teacher's guide. And again, you don't have to get word for word. The language your kids come up with in this is totally fine. And there is a part after this where they then take and say, well, what does that mean? So all the cups with lids were better than the cups without lids. What does that mean? Or all the cups with 2 walls were better than the cups with 1. So what does that mean? And that's that second part of the data analysis, which then leads them to put these cups in order. They rank them, they make a lineup, and they decide which one's best and which one's worst, and where all the ones in between go. When you are looking at the things that are useful to have and create and save from this lesson, so from lesson 1, the cold cup test and the class initial model is really helpful to have out. From this lesson, there are 2 things. One is the class data table, which has all of their data found in it for a cold cup test. And then secondarily, sometimes it's cool to keep the lineup of the cups that you ranked in order of best to worst up in front of you. Because they are going to refer back to that in lessons 3 and in lessons 4. So it's good to kind of leave it up there, and it's one of the things that you'll play around with. I have a few tips and tricks about things for you, materials here. The first of which is definitely do more thermometer practice than is suggested. There's a single slide for thermometer practice in the slide deck. You need to do more. I do it as my warm-ups. I do it as my homework. And it really helps the kids out a lot. If you can, and you set up a spreadsheet for class data collection, if you add the lab group numbers or perhaps even kids' names to the spreadsheet so they know where to record their data, that is super helpful. And then after they've entered their data, switching the spreadsheet to view only is also helpful. And again, if the kids and they're doing their experiment and they only get to 9 minutes of worth of temperature data, or 12 minutes worth of temperature data, or even 6 minutes worth of temperature data, it's fine. Whatever your final is, just use the same amount for everybody. The other thing that happens when they're doing their investigation is they all want to test the fancy cup. They want to touch the fancy milk cup with a lid and with a straw. And you might have to steer them a little bit here and say, hey, lab group 1 is doing that fancy lid, fancy cup, lid on, straw. Could you guys do it without the lid so we can compare the two? And most kids are pretty agreeable to that. As for materials, I would avoid ice. It seems to take time to melt, and it holds the water temperature longer and messes up your data. I love using these blue water coolers for the cold water. I freeze a 1 gallon milk jug the night before. I drop it in there, fill it up with water, and it stays cold all day. And really, that also allows kids to get their own water, and you don't have to walk around with pitchers of ice. It streamlines things a lot. And also, going along with that, you don't actually need like 400 milliliters of water. You can do this with 200 or 250, and it's more than enough. The only limit to this investigation and materials is the number of cups you have, and you'll gather them over time. Kids will start bringing them to you, but you can also check lost and found if you need more. There is nothing that gets added to our word wall during this lesson. These 2 days we talk about the word systems and maybe variables or changing things and data and patterns, but we don't actually add any of those to our word wall. We will in future lessons. So if you're worried about they're not getting the formal definitions and words and structure, it's okay. So thanks for listening in. I hope this helped you get oriented to the lesson and the big important parts. If you're curious how you get out of this lesson and on to lesson 3, it all starts with the cup rank order, and you kind of take a look at it and say, hey, would we rank these cups in the same order if we were using hot water instead of cold? Good luck. Have fun.